Starbucks is in trouble.
Starbucks announcing a $1 billion restructuring plan this morning in an SEC filing, adding that it will lay off some 900 non-retail employees and, as you said, close stores.
For decades, they sold more than just coffee. They sold a lifestyle, an ambience, a sense of global belonging to every city it entered. But today, it provides none of these things.
It's all part of a restructuring plan amid growing competition, inflation, and changing consumer tastes and communities.
Customers are quickly abandoning them for competitors, and same-store transactions are down 10% in the last quarter alone. At first, it seems obvious why this is happening. People are simply trading down to cheaper options. But the strange thing is, the more coffee they sell, the bigger this problem becomes. Compared to 10 years ago, sales have exploded. But behind the record numbers, something's breaking. Customers are leaving, stores are emptier, and the brand that once defined cafe culture now feels like it's lost its soul. So how did the world's greatest coffee chain end up in this mess? And is Starbucks now beyond saving, or do they simply need to wake up and smell the coffee? It should not come as a big surprise that a business charging $7.35 for a peppermint mocha frappuccino is struggling in today's economy. The entire F&B industry is bearing the brunt of the price-conscious consumer. The real reason why Starbucks is in serious long-term trouble is less about prices and more about principles. You see, Starbucks has abandoned the principles that made it so popular in the 90s and 2000s, and these core fundamentals have very little to do with the price of coffee. During this meteoric rise, Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz sought the help of the marketing expert Scott Bedbury. He was involved in Nike's 1988 Just Do It campaign. Instead of selling the best sneakers, Nike sold a lifestyle of personal empowerment, which was more appealing to customers, and this winning formula was replicated onto Starbucks.
It's not about the coffee, it's the experience. It's what happens around the cup. And that became the launch, if you will, to redesign the stores.
Instead of aspiring to become fitter and stronger, Starbucks sold a lifestyle of sophistication and opened up Americans to the world of European coffee culture. Coffee sizes were not small, medium, and large, but tall, venti, and grand, and you're welcomed by a warm and friendly barista. Starbucks realized that happy employees bred happy customers, and workers enjoyed full health benefits, stock option programs, and free online college courses. Ultimately, Starbucks aimed to become what is referred to as the third place between work and home, and its iconic purple armchairs turned Starbucks into a social setting. With this business model, Starbucks didn't need to spend much money on advertising. Geniusly, their customers did it for them. Going to Starbucks was a status symbol, something people would gloat about and proudly carry around their coffee cup in hand. People saw it as part of their identity, and so the expensive price was worth sacrificing. But this exclusivity soon wore off. Their rapid expansion led to the ridiculous but common situation where there was a Starbucks across the street from another one. And in this street in Houston, there's one across the street and then another Starbucks inside the Barnes & Noble next to them.
Well, better make it quick, kiddo. In 5 minutes, this place is becoming a Starbucks.
They fell into the trap of mass-producing an exclusive product. This would be like Rolex manufacturing watches at the same rate as Casio. At a certain point, the quantity erodes the perceived quality of the brand, and it no longer feels like an exclusive club. Schultz left the company in 2000, but in 2007 he was deeply concerned with the direction the company was heading. Starbucks had what you could refer to as experiential shrinkflation, and this was having a devastating impact on their profits. Shrinkflation, as you may know, is when companies reduce the size or quality of their product without reducing the price. This has happened to your cereal box. Toblerone tried to get away with fewer triangles, and over the years, Starbucks went from this to this. The experience of going to Starbucks quietly shrunk in quality. In Schultz's memo, he complained that the coffee beans were stored in sealable bags to keep them fresh, but that meant customers didn't get the inviting aroma of coffee when they walked through the door. The espresso machines drove more sales, but removed what Schultz referred to as the theatre of seeing your coffee being made. But there was one more important thing that Schultz failed to mention in this memo. By 2001, Starbucks had 171 drive-thrus at their stores. This was becoming a core component of their business. These drove up more sales, but customers now didn't even have to walk inside the front door to get a coffee, and drive-thrus now completely contradicted Starbucks' entire philosophy. As well as the bad optics that these drive-thrus created, baristas now had to divert their attention away from the in-store customers and attend to the line of cars looking for a quick grab and go. With every car that passed through, quality was being sacrificed for quantity. With this experience slowly deteriorating, stores ran the risk of becoming a place that merely served coffee, and fast food chains were also now selling gourmet coffee at lower prices. Not only were McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts undercutting Starbucks, they were also chipping away at the perceived social status of going to a store. This McDonald's ad took aim at a Starbucks snob finding out that the McCafe was a McDonald's.
Bro, what is this place?
It's a McCafe. It's part of McDonald's.
Oh, really?
And this Dunkin' Donuts one made fun of their unnecessary use of the Italian on their menus.
Can I get a large?
Oh, a DHE?
What's a DHE?
It's a large.
The bottom line was that Starbucks' reputation and share price were plummeting simultaneously. They were on a cliff edge and faced an identity crisis, and arguably the only person who could save them now was Howard Schultz. So in January 2008, 8 years after resigning, he made his now legendary return to the company. His solution was simple. Starbucks needed to return to its roots, or at least that's what he wanted you to think. You would imagine that during a global recession, Starbucks should have reduced its prices, but Schultz doubled down on doing this. He was following a basic marketing rule known as the price-quality heuristic. Consumers will naturally tend to associate higher price with higher quality and lower price with lower quality. If Starbucks lowered its price, that would in turn lower the perception of being a high-quality coffee. But the company was fighting battles on not one, but two fronts. While fast food outlets were undercutting their prices, there were also other places that were selling a better experience. Peet's Coffee and Caribou were not as ubiquitous as Starbucks and felt more like a brand that Starbucks once was, and local cafes also provided a communal aspect that a corporate giant could never match. In order to save the firm, Schultz made a very calculated move. He temporarily closed every single US store for training and told customers that they were going back to making high-quality coffee.
If you are looking for a cup of coffee this evening after work, you are gonna have to try someplace other than Starbucks for a few hours. Starbucks is closing the doors at its 7,100 stores across America today for a brief barista re-education. CEO Howard Schultz says the 3-hour closing will start at 5:30 p.m. local time and will aim to energize employees. He wants baristas to share their passion for making espresso.
He also invited 10,000 volunteers to a conference in New Orleans, where they collectively engaged in 50,000 hours of volunteer work for multiple charities in the area.
I wanted to come to New Orleans on my own to experience what has taken place post-Katrina.
Once the perception was fixed, the numbers soon followed. You can see how Starbucks was on a downward trajectory, but eventually returned back to normal. He had to shut down 600 underperforming stores, which was a blunt acknowledgement that Starbucks had opened way too many. The narrative Schultz sold was that Starbucks was going back to its roots, but after these publicity stunts, they went back down the same dangerous path they were heading before, and this wasn't a deliberate mistake. Instead, they had fallen into a series of traps that they couldn't escape from. During the 2010s, the drive-thrus transformed from a niche driver of sales to a fundamental component. By 2015, Starbucks had a drive-thru in about 1/3 of its US stores and accounted for 45% of the company's total retail revenue. It was destroying their image, but it was also too costly to remove. Because of these drive-thrus, waiting times were getting longer across each store. But Starbucks added another element that would transform waiting times from a slight problem to a catastrophe. In 2009, they created their own mobile app, meaning you could buy a Starbucks from your own home, and it would be ready when you arrived. But what was convenient for one customer was highly inconvenient for everyone else.
It is the biggest Achilles heel for Starbucks, and it's not even a close second.
If you walked into a store and saw a big long line of cars at the drive-thru, you could anticipate a longer wait time for your coffee, but the mobile app curated an invisible queue that no in-store customer could predict, and to rub it in, mobile customers got to skip the entire queue to get their cup of joe.
Where the mobile app became the primary vehicle, as well as the primary vehicle for dissatisfaction, because people couldn't get their drink on time, people were confused whether that was their drink, a lot of anxiety.
This was a nightmare for baristas and regular customers, but by 2017, it was also driving 27% of sales. Just like with drive-thrus, Starbucks had fallen into another trap of choosing quantity over quality, and there was no going back. On top of this, baristas had yet another headache: their menus. In 2010, Starbucks customers were able to customize their own frappuccinos, and they had their own choice of milk, coffee type, syrups, and toppings. Refreshers, Teavana tea drinks, and cold brews had also entered the menu, so baristas' tasks for the day skyrocketed, both in terms of volume and variety. The unicorn frappuccino looked great on Instagram, but was yet another convoluted coffee drink the Starbucks baristas had to make in front of a long line of increasingly frustrated customers. In 2017, 75% of Starbucks workers polled by coworker.org said their stores were not staffed to meet their goals. 89% said staffing levels were a problem, and 62% said their ability to deliver the best customer service possible had decreased. And this had an effect which reduced morale and turnover of staff. And here you have a vicious cycle. Mobile orders increased the workload, which increased the waiting time for customers, which then in turn reduced morale amongst the baristas. Staff left and new staff needed to be trained up, which once again increased the waiting time. More importantly, an overworked barista is less likely to be friendly to their customers, and unhappy employees breeds unhappy customers. In 2018, Schultz retired as CEO once again, and had seemingly restored Starbucks back to where he wanted it to be. The sad reality was that Starbucks had well and truly traded experience for efficiency, and the subsequent years would expose Starbucks as the shadow of what it once was. By 2021, the relationship between Starbucks and its staff had severed to the point where they felt the need to form unions, and in December, a store in Buffalo, New York became the first to officially do so. And it wouldn't be the last.
A victory nearly 3 months after this fight began, Starbucks workers overcoming strong opposition from management, which did encourage workers to vote against unionizing in order to maintain the current working relationship that they have with the company. Now, workers claim conditions have worsened over the course of the pandemic. They say they want better wages, conditions in stores, and a stronger working relationship with the company.
4 months later, Howard Schultz returned as interim CEO and was expected to save the day once again. But this time round, there was no positive news stories of volunteer work or dramatic closures to revitalise its baristas. Instead, Starbucks was in the news for all the wrong reasons. The company, once heralded for its happy employees, now faced accusations of union busting.
Over the past 18 months, Starbucks has waged the most aggressive and illegal union-busting campaign. That union-busting campaign has been led by Howard Schultz, the multi-billionaire founder and director of Starbucks.
Schultz stepped down a year later, but Starbucks was now beyond saving. Union issues had created bad publicity, but this was merely symptomatic of a much wider problem. Understaffing had been so corrosive not only to staff, but also to the experience of every customer. A common complaint was that waiting times have gotten much worse, and in June 2024, there was actual data to back this up. Bloomberg found that 8% of customers waited between 15 and 30 minutes for their orders, and 31% waited between 5 and 15. Compare that to 2019, where almost no customers waited over 15 minutes, and only 20% waited between 5 and 15. Now, add in the fact that consumers are experiencing a cost of living crisis, and you basically have a recipe for disaster, culminating in the recent closure of 900 stores across North America. So, is this simply a case of history repeating itself? Well, the reality is that Starbucks have dug themselves into a much deeper hole this time, and will find it all the more difficult to get out. The company's decision to dilute its brand year upon year has meant the cultural cachet it had in 2008 is a lot different than today. Back then, everybody knew what Starbucks was, but today they're not so sure. It has a drive-thru like a fast food restaurant, but claims to sell premium coffee. It wants to be a place to socialise, but its chairs are hard and uncomfortable. It wants to claim to be an ethical company and all about the community, but our news cycles are littered with stories about how unhappy their employees are. The only thing for certain is that Starbucks sales figures are going down, and they're experiencing negative earnings each quarter. Starbucks' story should serve as a cautionary tale for any premium brand. Urban retailers at some point will find themselves at a crossroad between quantity and quality, and once they make this decision, there is arguably no going back. The harsh reality is that Starbucks no longer needs to worry about losing the third space to mid-level and independent cafes. It already has.